I see there's an active chat conversation already going on, which is really good. I hear bells ringing outside, which means here in Vancouver it's 12 o'clock, which is the original starting time of this webinar, which takes until 1 o'clock. We have 1 hour. So welcome everybody to this session. Today's webinar, Integrating Bike Share and Public Transport, Insights from the Netherlands, is brought to you by the Consulate General of the Kingdom of the Netherlands in Vancouver, and especially also our friends from Hub Cycling in Metro Vancouver. My name is Sebastian Messerschmidt. I'm the Consul General for the Kingdom of the Netherlands in Vancouver. And I'm glad that you're able to join us during this, what we in Vancouver would call a lunch and learn session. But as I recognize that you might be calling in from the Netherlands or from across Canada or any other place, I saw Denver, US coming by as well. It might be a dinner or breakfast and learn session to you. As a Consulate General and as an economic network in Canada, our diplomatic missions are dedicated to build networks, and we connect ecosystems between Canada and the Netherlands. And we focus on increasing collaboration on different levels. We do this between businesses, research to research, and government to government, and also across those groups. I'm especially glad to be building stronger collaboration in the field of urban mobility, as it's part of a passion of mine. Sustainable urban mobility is good for our health, it's good for our wallet, which we Dutch, of course, like very much, and it just makes total sense. But I also just happen to love riding my bicycle, not only as a mammal, a middle-aged man in Lycra on a beautiful Sunday morning ride, but rather actually to commute to work. You see, I'm getting a call, so let's get rid of that. To commute to work, to transport me, or to transport my son, or to transport my groceries, just to go from A to B on a bicycle clears my head. It gets me to enjoy the elements, even here in Vancouver. There's no such thing as bad weather. There's just bad clothing. To stay fit, it's good to ride the bicycle as well. So there's tons of reasons, but it's just fun. We also see what a stronger connector urban mobility is between the Netherlands and Canada. And that gave us, as an organization, a big incentive to increase collaboration by setting up this series of webinars. So this one is the first. We want to share ideas about urban sustainability, mobility in the future, in cities and in rural areas. What can we learn from each other? Where can we leapfrog? Before we start the presentations today, I would like to especially thank our host, Hub Cycling, which is an active and amazing organization here in Metro Vancouver as a cycling advocacy group. It is a non-profit charitable organization with a mission to get more people cycling and more often. Hub Cycling accomplishes through advocacy, education, events, research, and consulting. And I've seen their work, and it's quite contagious, to be honest. From Bike the Night to bicycle classes or Ungap the Map, Hub Cycling aims to fill the gaps in the cycling network here in Metro Vancouver, making it easier for everyone to cycle more often. This work relies on the generous support of community members, like maybe yourselves. By contributing, you help to ensure that Hub Cycling can continue to push for safer streets and better cycling conditions for all. You can find details on their work on their website, which is bikehub.ca. Now, before we begin, on behalf of the Consulate, Hub Cycling, and our speakers, I'd like to acknowledge the fact that we are hosting this webinar today from the ancestral and unceded territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations. We acknowledge and respect and celebrate the Indigenous nations on whose treaty unceded territories we are fortunate to live, work, and operate, and of course, ride our bicycles. Before we begin, a few housekeeping rules. As you listen to the presentation, please use the chat function to ask questions. We'll give our presenters time at the end to answer your questions, and I hope we'll be able to answer most of them. If there are many, you might have to find other ways to come back to them. As a reminder, this meeting will be recorded, which Hub Cycling will share in the future. So that also means please do not share sensitive or personal information in the chat function. Today, we are discussing how integrating bike share programs with the wider public transportation system can benefit users by offering greater door-to-door mobility, reduce traffic congestion, and promote sustainable interurban travel. We will hear from the Dutch Cycling Embassy, Chris Bruntlett, who, apart from being Dutch, happens to be Vancouverite from the past as well, on how the Dutch experience of integrating bike share with public transit has not just served practical purposes, but supported the financial growth of the entire transit system. We're also lucky to have with us Mia Kohut from Moby Bike Share and Mirta Gamis from TransLink. They will help us understand the viability of this model for BC. They will demonstrate the benefits that it could bring to our region and maybe to the region where you're listening from as well. With that, I would like to proceed to introducing our speakers. Chris Bruntlett is an international relations manager at the Dutch Cycling Embassy in the Netherlands. It's a public-private partnership that represents the best knowledge, experience, and experts from the Netherlands. As a long-time campaigner in Vancouver in the past, he fell in love with the Dutch bike culture back in 2016. It inspired him to author the book Building the Cycling City, the Dutch Blueprint for Urban Vitality. If you haven't got it yet, I really encourage you to buy it and read it. Chris uses his knowledge and passion to share lessons for global cities, wishing these to become better places to live, better places to work, and of course, better places to cycle. His latest book is Curbing Traffic, the human case for fewer cars in our lives. Then we also hear from Mia Kohut. She's the CEO of Vancouver Bike Share Incorporated. It is perhaps better known as Moby, Vancouver's public bike sharing program. Mia spent 19 years promoting everyday cycling in Vancouver and North America. She's the former editor-in-chief and owner of Momentum Mag and the founder of Bike to Work Week in Metro Vancouver. She has a passion for inspiring change in peoples and cities and loves working towards a happier, healthier, and more sustainable future. Then Mirta Gamis works with the new mobility and the policy development and decision analysis teams within TransLink Strategic Planning and Policy Division. That's a whole mouthful. With over 5 years of experience in transportation planning in Canada, she is currently focused on initiatives exploring shared micromobility as a public transportation option, determining TransLink's role and exploring governance options. So, having introduced everybody, let's turn over to Chris for his main presentation. Then we will get an update from Mirta and Mia, who will provide a bit of BC context to see how the learnings of Chris has shared, could be replicated in BC. Chris Bruntlett, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sebastian. And yeah, good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you're located in the world. I can see from the chat section that it is truly a global audience, and it is truly an honor to be with you all today. Special thanks to Sebastian and Martin with the Netherlands Consul General in Vancouver for their generous support of this event. And of course, Kathy and Navdeep at Hub Cycling, who approached us out of the blue before Christmas with this idea and has ultimately come to fruition today. Really nice to see such a big audience as well. I think bike share kind of seems like a bit of a niche topic, but well, as I hope I will make the case with you today, it really is the key to unlocking this bike transit intermodality that is the backbone of the Dutch mobility system and is a large part of what cities can leverage in terms of reducing the amount of car dependence and car dominance on their streets. So with that, I will jump in. The Dutch Cycling Embassy, for those of you who don't know, we're a nonprofit foundation that was created by the Netherlands Ministry of Infrastructure in 2011. So we've been around for almost 15 years now. We are an intermediary between cities around the world that are looking for knowledge, expertise, help in the field of cycling, and over 100 Dutch organizations that are working on this topic internationally. They are from various backgrounds, various types of organizations. But we ourselves are just a fairly small organization, about 10 or 12 people, and we serve two purposes. It's diplomacy, and it's also economic development in terms of representing the interests of the Dutch cycling sector. So our network, yeah, is quite broad and extensive. It is now just over 100 different organizations from the public and private sector here in the Netherlands. It's engineers, it's planners, it's consultants, it's data collection companies, it's bicycle manufacturers, bicycle parking manufacturers. On the public side, there's municipalities, universities, of course, the National Railway Company that I'll spend a lot of time talking about today. And with each request we get, and we get thousands of requests each year, we're able to put together a team of experts to respond to that request in a tailor-made fashion. What does that look like? Well, it could be as simple as an email exchange or a video call, but we do like to do the bulk of our work in a face-to-face setting. That is, we host probably 50 to 70 study visits each year. Decision makers, mayors, city councillors, and other executives, decision makers, getting them on a bike in a Dutch city. There's the mayor of Montreal, Valerie Plante, in the bottom left corner there, and getting them inspired and informed, but also putting them in a classroom setting to learn about what they experienced and how it might be translatable to their own context. Inversely, we do Think Bike workshops where we're bringing the Dutch expertise overseas. And again, we do probably 20 to 30 of these workshops each year in locations as diverse as Bangkok, Dubai, and Miami. And it really is about introducing best practice from the Netherlands and then working on real life case studies with the local planners and engineers on projects that they are working on. So yeah, with all that said, for those of you who don't know me, as Sebastian indicated, I am a former Vancouverite. I was lucky enough to live in the Broadway commercial neighborhood with my young family for the better part of a decade. And we lived what we described as a car light lifestyle. We were very close to the Broadway commercial subway station, commercial drive shopping. And so we sold our family car very early in that process. And while we weren't completely car free, we were certainly dependent on the various car sharing services that were available to us, because anytime that we left our neighborhood, unfortunately, the mobility networks, the public transport system didn't quite get us to where we needed to go. And so we ended up really leaning on the availability of those car sharing services. When we moved to the Netherlands in 2019, well, that decision was based on a number of factors, not the least of which was the rising inaffordability of Vancouver, a job offer that my wife, Melissa, and I couldn't refuse, but a decision to downsize our lifestyle from our East Vancouver neighborhood to the small city of Delft, which is probably about 110,000 people. It's halfway between Rotterdam and The Hague, a university town, a very compact, classical 15-minute city. But we chose it specifically because our jobs were located there, but we knew we were connected to the larger Randstad region. Within a few weeks of moving to the Netherlands, we were faced with a dilemma. Our Canadian driver's licenses were no longer valid in the Dutch context. The Dutch government only has agreements with Alberta and Quebec, bizarrely. And so rather than go through the training program and the examination process, we decided to give ourselves 6 months of living completely car-free in the Netherlands to see what that would entail. And so we got the OV chip cards, the national public transport cards, which are good for bikes, buses, trains, and bike share. And we set about, living this car-free lifestyle to see if we could really do it without car sharing. And so, well, that became even more complicated when the Dutch Cycling Embassy moved offices from Delft to Utrecht, which is about 70 kilometers in distance. And I always say, if I lived in many other places in the world, I would either have to look for a new job or look for a new house. But in this case, the bike train combination provided pretty seamless door-to-door mobility from my house in Delft into a bike parking facility of 10,000 in Delft railway station, straight down onto the platform where there are 28 trains per hour leaving Delft station. And then on the other side of the journey, the blue and yellow OV Fiets public transport bikes that are run by the railway company to get me to my final destination. And so it was linking these modes of transportation that ultimately replaced the car in our lives. And 6 years later, we are still completely without driver's licenses. Not just the commute to the office, but all kinds of cultural, social, recreational trips, going camping or glamping, going to the museum or concert, visiting friends, taking our son to summer camp, taking him to baseball practice, all in fairly remote areas of the Netherlands. We were able to chain the bike and the train to get exactly where we were going with very little inconvenience and quite a lot of fun. But before I start talking about Vancouver, I think it's important to make sure that we're comparing oranges to oranges. That is, we're not just talking about Delft or Amsterdam in isolation. The Randstad region is this horseshoe-shaped metropolis of nearly 10 million people that is really well connected by, well, cycling, walking, public transport, and one of the densest motorways networks in Europe. But it is quite comparable in terms of the population density with Vancouver. And so, yeah, looking at the two contexts, I think they can be at least somewhat comparable, not the least of which is their polycentric nature, in that there are people traveling from various nodes to various nodes, and it doesn't really have one central location where people are living and or working. So the overarching message that I'll start with here in terms of talking about the bike train combination is that the bike will never be a like for like replacement for the automobile. And similarly, public transport is not a like for like replacement for the private car. The bicycle doesn't have the range, the public transport doesn't have the convenience. It can't pick you up outside your front door largely and drop you off at your destination. But when we start thinking about chaining the two, making it seamless, making it convenient, making it easy, then we're really talking about a car replacer, not just for short journeys, but in my case, journeys of 60 to 70 kilometers, region-wide journeys, or nationwide in the case of the Netherlands, without needing the expense or the hassle of an automobile. And the scale at which the bike train combination is used in the Netherlands is really actually quite staggering. So it's half of all the train journeys in the country start with a bicycle ride. Nearly a quarter of all the cycling that's done in Dutch cities is either to or from a railway station. And it's really affected the spatial planning and the development of the country insofar as 80%, that's 4 out of 5 people in the Netherlands, are within 7.5 kilometers of a train station. So most people that live in the Netherlands have fairly convenient access to the train network through the cycling network. And the bottom statistic is, I think, the one that matters the most, of course, is that most of these people have access to a car, but they choose the bike train combination as an alternative because it's much more attractive, affordable, and convenient. There are myriad advantages to chaining cycling and public transport. We've created an explainer video that you can access via the link in the QR code. I won't spend time going through them all, but I think the first two are worth emphasizing. The first, of course, is the increase of the catchment area of each stop or station. So if we're willing and able to walk 1 kilometer or so in 20 minutes to access public transport, when we enable cycling, which is we're able to travel 4 to 5 times the same distance with the same time and energy output, then we're exponentially increasing the size of the catchment area by 25 to 30 times. So that's 25 to 30 times more passengers that can access the system simply by enabling the bicycle as a feeder mode. It's not about spacing everything 5 times further apart, though. There really is a convenience of choice that's provided through that, in that if one stop or station goes down temporarily, if there's a service disruption, if there's a different route or a line that you want to take, you do have the choice of multiple stops and stations depending on your final destination, which ultimately, again, provides this freedom and alternative to the car. But, and we also have to emphasize this because this is kind of a dead end that a lot of advocates and professionals and planners fall into, is that we really shouldn't be thinking, at least long-term, about putting bikes on the public transport system. It really only works in small incidents and opportunities. It can often affect the capacity of the public transport system, and it's taking up precious floor space. It can affect the reliability of the system in terms of loading and unloading time. But overall, the most important point is it affects the overall scalability of the system And when we're talking about, really increasing public transport ridership and cycling ridership, then we have to be thinking bigger than just a few bicycles on a few buses or trains. A lot of people will say, well, the Netherlands has always been that way. I'm here to tell you that's not the case. And a lot of people, including a lot of Dutch people, don't recognize how recent this shift has been. And it's really been a political decision and a policymaking decision that really began in the mid 1990s with a development of a road safety policy and a street design policy that has resulted in almost half of all of the bike infrastructure, and a real focus on getting people not just from their house to their office, but also to their public transport facilities. When they get to the public transport facilities, again, because we're not encouraging people to take their bikes on the trains, there has to be a free, secure bike parking space. And so in and around the turn of the millennium, the Dutch railways put together a plan where they really, with urgency, with budget, focused on creating these bike parking spaces. And so over the last 2 decades, they've invested enough money to create 300,000 such spaces, developing a really concrete set of design principles. And guess what? That induced demand is getting greater and greater with the need to add more and more parking as this mode becomes more attractive to more and more people. But the last piece of the puzzle, and the reason why we're here today, is, of course, the blue and yellow miracle, as it's been called by the Dutch newspapers, the OV-fiets, which is, again, a public transport bicycle, a rental bicycle that's owned and operated by the Dutch railways. It's accessible with just a tap of your card. You borrow it for a 24-hour period for around €4. And there are nearly 23,000 of these bikes spread across 300 of the train stations. And they're used on an immense scale, and each year the ridership gets greater and greater. The customer satisfaction remains incredibly high, and the bottom line, of course, is that this system is completely financially self-sustaining. So the railway operator owns and operates it, but it doesn't run at a loss. What have been the results of these investments in infrastructure and parking and bike sharing? Well, there's been a real spike in train ridership here in the Netherlands, and the numbers are quite impressive. This graph can be a little bit convoluted, but the headline is that because the Dutch railways have pivoted in and around the turn of the millennium from just a railway provider or a public transport provider into a door-to-door mobility provider, investing in ways to get their customer to and from the turnstile, they've effectively doubled their ridership, they've doubled their revenues. And so this virtuous circle, if you will, of not just putting more cyclists on the cycle paths, but putting more passengers in seats has meant that they can continually invest in their system. They can increase the frequency and service of the trains. They haven't, interestingly, really increased the coverage of the system, adding stations. So this increase, this doubling of train ridership has really come simply by improving access to the various stops and stations. The last piece of the puzzle, of course, is the interesting one, and it's difficult to say what the exact impact on train ridership the bike sharing service has been, but this is a survey that NS did in and around 2011, where they surveyed OV-fiets users, and 8% admitted that they would have driven a car instead of using the train had that last mile solution not been available to them. And 54% of them said that they ride the train more often because of the availability of that last mile solution. So we can say that it's certainly just knowing that you have a reliable solution to get you from the public transport stop to your final destination means that people are much more likely to take public transportation. Of course, this is much bigger than just the railway companies' revenues and ridership, and this is quite a holistic way that the Dutch national government in particular evaluates infrastructure investments. They do a social cost benefit analysis where they look at there's an upfront investment in a piece of infrastructure, whether it's a bridge or a tunnel or an airport or a bike share system. But what are the savings to society potentially, or the costs to society in the long run as the lifespan of that infrastructure project unfolds. And anything, of course, as you probably already know, that gets people out of their cars onto active transportation saves society with each kilometer traveled, and that is less maintenance, less healthcare, less traffic congestion. So it really is a win-win to society, and it may be the railway company that's making the investment, but it's the broader society that's saving €2 in this case, €2.40 for every euro that's invested in the bike share system. Perhaps, what they haven't been able to quantify is the further investments in car infrastructure, the widening of motorways, the addition of flyovers and overpasses that the government's been able to avoid because in the context of these bike train journeys where people are less likely to clog up the motorways with the availability of this door-to-door mobility service. Now, the railway company continues to innovate in interesting ways in terms of making their products more accessible, more user-friendly, reducing the friction between the various modes of transportation. One of the greatest examples of that is the mobile application that NS has. You can do door-to-door trip planning that includes the bike train combination. It will tell you exactly how many bikes are available at each station. And it will even tell you the weather in terms of the rain forecast and or wind strength, which Dutch people don't like to admit, but certainly impacts their decision, at least the timing of their journey. NS is also experimenting with electric OV-fiets, which it's rolled out at 4 specific stations in more suburban and rural locations. And they're finding, of course, that they cost slightly more, but people are more likely to use them for further and further distances. If a traditional bike is being used for 3 to 5 kilometers, the electric bike extends that range by twofold and makes that journey more like 8 to 10 kilometers. And then the last innovation that is also being rolled out at this time is the smart lock system. So up to now, you've had to tap your card with an attendant at the station to borrow your bicycle. That's becoming a thing of the past, as you can now just tap your card right onto the wheel lock of the bicycle, starting the rental. And then when you're out and about in the city using the bike, your tap card also becomes the way to lock and unlock that bicycle when you come out at the end of your appointment or whatever. Not to say that this is just a Dutch phenomenon, and I just want to wrap up a little bit by talking about other examples. The German railway operator who we've hosted as the Dutch Cycling Embassy and a number of study visits are rolling out their own system with now 13,000 bikes. It's more free-floating system, so they've taken a slightly different approach rather than making it just available at the train stations. And the Belgian railways are doing something similar, albeit quite smaller, in terms of making their blue bike system available to Belgian rail passengers. Not just a European thing. I think there's 2 quite interesting examples on North American shores. That is, LA was the first city, interestingly, to really integrate its bike sharing system with its public transportation system. That is, you can tap now the same card that you ride the light rail and the metro system and the buses to access the bike share system. And Montreal has really, over the years, of course, expanded its bike sharing system to become more of a regional-based system, with the plan to expand to all 19 boroughs in the next 3 to 4 years. Why is this important? I think we know many different reasons that I've mentioned, but it really does come down to giving more people access to their daily needs, housing, education, healthcare, etc., employment, of course, without having to take on the financial burden of a car. And it's something that's we don't talk nearly enough about, but when we add up all these expenses, you know, it's really often a third of people's incomes that they're spending on their mode of transportation. And of course, there is the ultimate irony, which is by providing alternatives to the car, we're actually making things pretty good for drivers. The fact that the Netherlands is regularly ranked as one of the lowest traffic congested countries in the world. So I'm going to show you one last thing that we've prepared at the Dutch Cycling Embassy, just to give you a sense of the potential reach of the public transport system, in this case, the rapid transit system here in Metro Vancouver, by taking the 1 kilometer walking catchment area and now expanding it to the 5 kilometer catchment area. And you can see, again, this exponential reach of people that may not have the economic means or the privilege of living within walking distance of a SkyTrain station, but can potentially access the system if we get the infrastructure right, if we get the parking right, and if we get that bike sharing system stretched outside of the city of Vancouver's boundaries. So I'll close with a rhetorical question. I think, again, we're hearing a lot about the future of mobility these days, and it's a lot about autonomous cars. We're going to be living, working, exercising, sleeping in our cars. That doesn't change the fundamental problems of geometry. It doesn't change the fundamental problems of equity and access. And I think the bike train combination solves a lot of the challenges we've been trying to solve for a very long period of time without there just being more cars on the road. So with that, I will thank you very much for your attention. The books are available from Island Press. The Dutch Cycling Embassy is online and on social media. And if you don't get any or your questions answered, please feel free to reach out to us or myself personally on LinkedIn. So with that, I will hand things over to Myrta, and looking forward to answering some questions once the three presentations are done. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Okay. Can everyone see my screen okay?
Looks good, Myrta.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So yeah, I'll just try to bring this into a Metro Vancouver context. As many of you know, we have this long-term transportation vision. We call it T2050, and it kind of helps the region to stay on track with our transportation goals. As part of this strategy, we mentioned a couple of times share micromobility, mostly under two main goals. The first one being that convenience, where we want the region to grow that active transportation as a first choice to move people around. And we want to do so by improving access to share micromobility, making them seamlessly integrated to the wider transportation system and ensuring they're safe, accessible, and easy to use. And then the other instance where we mentioned share micromobility is under the affordability goal, where we emphasize that we want the services to be widely available and accessible at a low cost to make this a realistic option for a broader range of people and also for everyday use travel. So beyond our convenience and affordability goals, in Metro Vancouver, we've also been exploring how this can make a more equitable and more resilient transportation system, which is part of our two strategic lenses to make our original vision a reality. Equity and resilience in transportation is grounded in giving people's choices, and worldwide we've seen how bike share can be cost-effective and a convenient alternative for car ownership, and also an enhancement and extension of public transportation. So in Metro Vancouver, we know that one of the key regional barriers is for people to adopt more of these active transportation choices is that access to bikes, e-bikes, etc. And we've also been seeing very promising initiatives such as UBC Sustainable Transportation Program, providing 50% discount to riders, as well as the Mobi Youth Program, where riders between the age of 12 and 18 get a discounted membership. And beyond equity, we've also started seeing how bike share can help enhance resilience of the transportation system, helping people still move around whenever there's a disruption on the transportation options that we have available. On the TransLink side, we have already started exploring this through targeted interventions. So for example, in Surrey and Richmond, we collaborated with Bird and Lime whenever there's been some service disruptions or station closures. And we've also started seeing where in Coquitlam, with higher usage during the evening times, which kind of coincides with transit being less frequent. We've also collaborated with Mobi bikes as well as Lime and Neuron for whenever there's an increase in demand. So for example, Spanish banks, we have a collaboration there to put a temporary station during the summer months, and Coquitlam concert series when there's a larger event to move people more easily. And I mean, if we look internationally, we even have some academic research looking at how the strikes on the London Underground in 2019 caused bike share to have a huge spike in usage. So really proving how this can help increase resiliency of transportation. So how does shared micromobility look like in Metro Vancouver? Well, in the last few years, we've seen significant growth. Of course, we started with Mobi in 2016, but ever since, with electrification and availability of more devices, such as e-bikes, e-scooters, and whatnot, more municipalities started introducing the services in their local governments. And today we have 6 different operators, so Neuron, Lime, Mobi, Hopper, Evolve, and Bird, offering their services throughout the region. And it's really exciting to see municipalities taking those first steps in this space and see that strong adoption and growing demand. But there's still like some gaps and challenges that limit shared micromobility's potential to fully support those regional and broader transportation goals. One of them is there's limited coverage still. There's some key areas with high potential that don't yet have service. And in many cases throughout the region, the cost is comparable to our car sharing options. And there's also some pricing inconsistencies as well as different ways that these modes operate throughout the region, which of course vary by operator and location. And last, we also have a bit of a lack of interoperability, meaning the services don't really yet integrate seamlessly with each other or with the larger transportation system. And that means, you have to download 6 apps if you want to use them all, to test them all. And there's also municipal boundaries that can become barriers. You can't do cross-boundary trips as easily. So with this in mind, how can the region move forward and unlock that potential of these services? Well, we know that in T2050 we have this vision and where we want to go, but the document doesn't really outline roles and responsibilities or a roadmap or what to do next in order to get there. So in the last year, within TransLink, we have been working and exploring ways to enhance that affordability, reliability, accessibility, and convenience of the services. And we've been working closely with first the local governments to understand the relationship with the services and their local needs. We've also reached out to UBC, SFU, our local universities, to have a more informed and localized understanding onto the value and impacts of these services. And of course, we've been collaborating with service providers through various channels, such as those collaborations I mentioned before, for that service disruption and increased demand. And we've also been working with them through RightLink, which is a pilot where we're looking to explore that multimodal planning, payment, sign-up integration. And we also launched last year an RFI to kind of understand the regional vision from a service provider point of view for the region. And yeah, ultimately our goal is with these conversations is basically to balance that unified user-friendly approach with the local needs. And there's one thing for sure, that achieving this will require a lot of coordinated effort among public sector stakeholders. Particularly if we want to align not just on the goals, but also in terms of affordability and the long-term viability of these services. And that's it for my presentation. I'll pass it on to Mia.
Right. Hello, everyone. My name's Mia. I'm calling in from Vancouver. I'm the CEO of Vancouver Bike Share. Notice some of the comments in the chat, so I can't wait to address some of those in my presentation. The first couple of slides I'm going to go through really quick because I think the real bread and butter comes a little bit later on. So Mobi, Vancouver Bike Share, owner and operator of Mobi by Rogers for the City of Vancouver since 2016. Our mission is to connect our community with accessible, convenient, and exceptionally serviced shared micromobility. We have 2 government partners, the University of British Columbia and the City of Vancouver, and this is our service area, which covers about half of the City of Vancouver. Since 2016, we've seen over 27 million trips, 20 million bikes. We have an equity program that's supported over 2,500 members, and we've seen over 400,000 users on the Mobi system since 2016. So I really want to talk about the opportunities to connect to transit and some equipment innovations. So we've surveyed our members. 94% of them think that bike share is an enhancement to TransLink's public transit system. 54% of our members use bike share in conjunction with SkyTrain, and 43% of our members with the bus or C-Bus. So this is definitely, you'll see here, definitely a first mile, last mile solution. And you've kind of seen this map already. This is I liked Chris's map and his intro to what's possible in the region, because we too believe that you could easily build a regional bike share system along those key, in those key city centers, and really linking to the SkyTrain network, and to really increase those in catchment areas. So these are the visions that we have for our region. Sorry. And speaking of catchment areas, so this is the Metro Town example, which Chris also talked about. You know, the current catchment area for walking to a SkyTrain station is, 800 meters. But if you extend that for bike share, all of a sudden you have a 2,500 meter in catchment area to a SkyTrain station, which is such a huge population growth that can such a big population that can now have access to public transit and public transit services. And this is what we're hoping to bring to Vancouver. We have some new equipment which takes up much a lighter footprint. It can be connected to the grid. It charges through magnets. So pretty hopeful and excited that we'll get to see this new technology in Vancouver in the coming years. And I think it's also really important for us to kind of talk about the business of bike share and how systems can be set up so differently. So we're a privately owned system here in Vancouver, and within the Canadian context, our bigger cities, Montreal, Toronto, as well as Hamilton and Quebec City, are publicly owned and publicly funded, where here on the West Coast, we're a hodgepodge of smaller systems, and a lot of them, not us, but a lot of them are actually funded by VCs and came out of the tech industry. Also see some great examples of how bike share and public transit agencies can connect. So Chris brought up the Metro bike share example in LA, but also in London, they own their transit owns their bike share, as well as Metro Bike in Austin, and the RTC bike share are just examples in North America of the synergies between bike share and transit agencies. This is kind of my favorite part of the presentation, because you have no idea how many times we get compared to the Bixby system in Montreal and the Toronto bike share system in Toronto, which are big systems, very affordable. They move a lot of people. And so I think here's just kind of an opportunity to show you a little bit about the differences. So we are the third largest system in Canada, with 2,000 bikes, 600 e-bikes. We pale in comparison to how many trips per day you are seeing on the bike shares in Montreal and in Toronto. 2.4 is actually not bad for North America, but paling in comparison to our counterparts in Montreal and Toronto, who, our system's 40 square kilometers, where in Toronto, Montreal, they're spanning a much wider and catchment area, and have so many other cities, particularly Montreal. They have like 30 plus cities that are a part of the Bixby system. And pricing, Mobi is very expensive. Why? Because we don't get any subsidies. So here's a look at a comparator between pricing, because I think this is just such an important. This is so important to getting more people riding, is affordability. And again, compared to our comparators in Montreal and Toronto, while our pay-as-you-go rates are similar, they've managed to keep both their monthly and their annual costs much cheaper than we've been able to here. And really, at the end of the day, what this comes down to is funding and capital funding. So Moby got an initial $5 million contribution from the city of Vancouver in 2016, and a $1 million contribution from TransLink in 2018. And UBC has provided $600,000 in 2022 to get the expansion out there. But we have seen a tenth and this is very modest numbers, a tenth or less of the amount of funding that the Montreal and the Toronto systems have received. So by enabling that funding, they've been able to enable cheaper prices, much larger systems that are widely used and accessible by so many more people. And of course, we can even dream bigger. Our Europe obviously is just such a great example of how bike share and transit have been fully integrated. If you compare Vancouver to the city of Marseille or the city of Paris, our pricing is 10 times as much, and they've been able to really offer low pricing, which in turn gets them 9 million to so many more trips than we experience here. Oh, sorry. So finally, I leave you with this question. Is bike share a form of public transportation? And I think we've heard today, especially from Chris, that we should definitely start thinking of it as such. And in places where it is treated as such and adequately funded, bike share thrives. So I hope we can find something similar in our region here.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mia. It's very inspirational to hear the business side of things, and Myrtha for the TransLink side of things, and Chris for the Dutch experience. I must say, if you take a picture of Amsterdam in the 1970s, of downtown Amsterdam, it was infested with cars. So I like how you said it's a political decision to go a different way. It is possible. People yell out, "Oh, this is not Amsterdam." It could be Amsterdam in the 1970s. So then it is. And then also, I like how TransLink is really actively involving the other forms of transportation in the planning. And it's one of the questions I would have toward Myrtha. If you look at a growth of Surrey by 6% every year, and also densification of the cities here in this region, how does TransLink look at the bike share infrastructure? How does that? How are you going to integrate that into the fast-growing population? And to me, I'd like to say, well, the other provinces are giving the competitors some subsidies, and you're not getting them, which I can hear your frustration, and I get it. And if it's a public form of transportation, then why not? So how do you keep your business model sane and healthy? Do people are actually willing to pay this, or would they be pay more if you get better services? What is your outlook? So those would be three questions I would like quickly ask, but then I would quickly want to turn to what people asked on the chat, because there's many of them. Myrtha?
Right. Yeah, we've seen a lot of growth in Surrey as well as in Metro Vancouver in general. I think it's the forecasts really fell short into how Metro Vancouver was going to grow. And of course, that puts a lot of pressure on the transportation system itself. We're seeing a lot of overcrowding in our buses, as well as, that complexity on having a sustainable funding model for TransLink. And personally, I feel like bike sharing can provide, again, an alternative for people to move around. We're not saying it's a solution for everyone, but even if 5 people, hop on that bike, maybe it does free up space for that stroller to get into the bus. And, it's about providing that options to people to get to their door and rely less into one more or another, one mode or the other, depending on those disruptions to our transit.
Yeah, totally. Let me go to the questions because there's so many in the chat, and thank you, Kathy, for selecting many of them. I got one for Chris here by Jacob Sheridan from Cincinnati Metro. Does the OV feeds work as a docked or dockless system, and can someone actually ride one from the station to their front door, or just to the nearest docking station? How does it work in the Netherlands?
Yeah, it's neither really, and I think it's more helpful to think of it as a bicycle rental rather than bicycle sharing, because you're basically renting the bike for a 24-hour period, and you do technically have to return it to the same train station where you took it out. There's the possibility of taking it to a different train station with a €12 fine. So not a lot of people do that. And then you are, in fact, only invoiced for all of your public transport usage, the buses, bikes, trains, etc., at the end of the month, with all the taps of your card that you've used. So it's not a membership-based system. Anybody with a public transport card can access it, but it is more helpful to perhaps think of it as a rental system rather than a sharing system.
All right, thank you. That's a good one. Then for Mia, I've got a question from Benjamin Fryback in Oregon. What is the cost for users of public bike share versus private bike share?
Well, the pricing in the region is all quite similar. So there is no publicly funded bike share in Metro Vancouver.
Right, thank you for that. And then let me see, because there's so many questions and we have very little time left, which is unfortunate. Seamus Joyce Johnson, has the National Railways, the NS, given any insight into how much theft there is of the OV feeds, especially while using the lock? Anything on theft?
Yeah, that's a good question. I haven't seen or heard anything, but my understanding is it's quite low because I think the bikes are obviously quite recognizable. So it's not like you can just take one as your everyday bicycle.
You'll have to spray paint it very quickly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And anybody that's taking out a bicycle, they're using their OV chip card, which is connected to their bank account. So that's kind of the form of deposit that you're using when you check out the bike, and then you are ultimately responsible. But I'm not sure, in the case of theft, and I've never actually heard of a case where it has been stolen.
That's a good question, because bike theft is a problem in the Netherlands. It used to be when I was living there still, though. So, Mirta, I have Nicholas Valencia asking, has TransLink considered using the downstream portion of bus zone, space for buses to pull out, as potential locations for micromobility installation and integrating more closely with bus operations?
Sorry, can you repeat bus zone?
Yeah, so has TransLink considered using the downstream portion of bus zones, which is the space for buses to pull out, as potential locations for micromobility installation and integrating more closely with bus operations?
Right, yeah, that's a good question. And we've explored how these services integrate with our system. It would really depend on how that space allocation looks like. Of course, there's a bit of complexity into our operations, make sure that the buses are entering safely that zone, and liability issues. And then the space that there would be for a bike share system, of course, is things that we are exploring, but it's very location specific on how that would work.
That's clear. Thank you so much. Chris, what are the benefits of an OV feed, the public transportation bicycle, if it's mostly siphoning passengers away from buses and trams, which the National Railways, the NS, doesn't run? Is that an effect you see happening?
It's maybe a little bit chicken and egg, and we always say this about the transportation system in Dutch cities in general. There's not a need for the same level of frequency and coverage because so many people are cycling in the first place. So in this case, they may be taking some customers away from using the buses and trams as a last mile solution, but I don't think it's black and white, and it's not either or. I think those, as I indicated in the survey, those passengers probably would have taken a car if the bike wasn't available to them for the last mile anyway.
The 8%?
Yeah, so we're growing the pie rather than worrying about fighting over the slices of the pie.
The difference, okay. Then for Mia, I have Anders from Burnaby. Do you find that adoption rates in each of Mobi's cities vary greatly based on what the helmet laws are like in their respective provinces or states? Helmet laws have any impact?
Well, it would be lovely if we didn't have a helmet law here in British Columbia, but and it was a bit of a challenge to getting a bike share system started because we did have to supply helmets as well as bikes. But luckily if we don't talk about it and there's continues to be little enforcement, it hasn't been too much of a hindrance.
Okay. And getting the helmets produced and bought and combined with the bicycles wasn't a showstopper for you guys, apparently.
No, I mean, that just adds to the bottom line, which we pass on to the customer in high fees.
Yeah, high fees. There you go. Let's see. Yeah, for Mia also, have you found any correlation between cycling infrastructure within a city increasing demand for bike share or vice versa?
110%.
110%.
110%. Our busiest stations are along the AAA infrastructure in Vancouver. And in turn, people see the infrastructure, they try bike share, they want to ride somewhere where that's safe. So I definitely think, having the infrastructure to start is good, but if you don't have it, bike share can help bring that demand.
Thank you. All right, we're really going into the last minutes now. Yeah, let's see, let's pick this one. To Chris, are there ride sharing and car sharing services for local license holders in the Netherlands?
There are, but we're often asked this question as Canadians in the Netherlands, is there anything the Dutch could learn from Canadian cities? And our first answer is always car sharing. We were blessed to have a municipality in Vancouver that really encouraged and subsidized and promoted car sharing, which became the reason we ultimately sold our family car. And then getting to the Netherlands, we were quite shocked actually at how there aren't many options. They're quite expensive. They're quite prohibitive.
Yeah.
And as a result, despite all the gains that they've made in cycling here, the rate of car ownership remains incredibly high. And a lot of those cars are just parked on the street for 6.5 days of the week for the occasional kind of hardware store run that could be made with a shared car. So I think we're constantly saying that this is one area of opportunity there. If Dutch municipalities really promoted car sharing the way the city of Vancouver did, then there could be a lot of free public space opened up, particularly in the streets and the plazas.
Okay, then unfortunately, I'm getting signals that I can only ask one more question. So I'm going to pick one for Mia, which is from Vincent. Has there been considerations of including stations in the setbacks for residential developments? They tend to go along major public right-of-ways, but I can see a lot of benefit to residents and the bike share by having a station a few meters from the front of high-density residential building.
Yeah, so Vancouver has this through their TDM measures. So new developments are encouraged to put space for bike share. And we've actually secured quite a few spots for electrification through that program. So for other cities out there thinking about it, I'd encourage you to look at what the city of Vancouver has done to save space at residential buildings for bike share.
Excellent. Excellent. I was quite also just to come back to Myrta's point before, like you said, the conquitment concerts was where you saw a spike in using bike share. We saw the same in the Formula One in Zandvoort in the Netherlands, Formula One auto race, car racing. There was a bike sharing system with thousands of bikes. The pictures were just beautiful to people who like bicycles. The pictures were quite inspiring. Yeah, it's good to see that that alternative is really gaining ground. And people are really looking into being more healthy and more fit. Just before I hand over the last words to Kathy, I want to thank you everybody for being in here, and I wanted to point out that for the Dutch Consulate General also, we are really interested. If you want to know more about the linkages between the Netherlands and Canada in this, then we also want to get involved. You can find us on LinkedIn. The Consulate General of the Kingdom of the Netherlands is on LinkedIn. You can find us also through email, Van for Vancouver at minbuza, which is kind of a difficult min for ministry, MIN, buza.nl. So do approach us if you see more links between yourselves and the Netherlands, even if you're outside our jurisdiction here in Western Canada, even if you're in the US or somewhere else. Our office knows our networks quite well, so if you need contacts in our diplomatic missions where you are, then let us know. We can get you into contact with persons instead of general emails. Kathy, I think it's up to you to round off.
Thanks so much, Sebastian, and also to the Consulate General of the Netherlands in Vancouver for your support with this webinar and moderating. I'm Kathy Kuna from Hub Cycling. And just before we finish here, we wanted to really extend a big thank you to all the presenters for all the information that they shared with us. Hub is going to be sending around a recording of this meeting in the next few days, as well as the slides, so stay tuned for that email. And we have an exciting line of other workshops planned for the entire year moving forward, including another webinar collaboration with the Consulate General of the Netherlands. And that's going to happen on April 8th. And it's called Cycling Towards Equitable Mobility, How Starting with Empathy Inspires Safer Streets for Everyone. So we're going to pop the link in the chat in just a minute, but please sign up for our Hub newsletter. It's monthly, and you'll get updates on this webinar as well as with all our other information on cycling advocacy in Metro Vancouver and all across the province, and find out more about all the work that we do. And we also just wanted to let you know that the Netherlands Consulate will also be involved in several urban mobility initiatives, including a Dutch film festival that's organized by the Dutch Cultural Association on Sunday, March 28th, with a movie focused on cycling and children in Rotterdam. And we are also looking forward to a visit to support the Bruntletts, Chris and Melissa, at the Dutch Cycling Embassy of Vancouver in the first week of October. So stay tuned for more details.
Nice, somebody sharing our notes. We're sharing our notes.
Oh, and if you want more ways to get involved with Hub, you can support our advocacy work by donating at bikehub.ca/donate. So we're going to leave the meeting chat open just for a few more minutes. And again, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks, Sebastian, Mirta, Chris, and Mia. Feel free to sign off. And we really appreciate all your work today and all the information that you've provided us to take forward.
Thanks, everybody. Stay safe everywhere.